Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 108th season of the Canadian Club of Toronto. My name is Noella Milne, and I'm the Vice President of the club. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Lapchi Choi, Vice Chancellor of the University of Hong Kong, to our podium today. And now, ladies and gentlemen, in honor of today's event, which has been co-organized by the Canadian Club, the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office, and the Hong Kong Canada Business Association, would you please stand and join me in a toast to Canada and to Hong Kong. To Canada and to Hong Kong. Enjoy your lunch. And now we're ready to begin today's program, and I'm going to start by introducing our head table. I would like each head table guest to please stand as I call your name and remain standing until everyone has been introduced. And I will ask you, our live audience, to please hold your applause until the last person has been introduced. Starting on my far left, Ivan McFarland, President, Board of Directors, Fine Health Information Services, and a Director of the Canadian Club of Toronto. Dr. Kwong Loy Shan, Vice President and Principal, University of Toronto at Scarborough. John R. Evans, Chairman of the Board, Torstar Corporation. Dorothy Jean Marr, President, Toronto Section, the Hong Kong Canada Business Association. And Bisania So, Director, Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office, Toronto, representing the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. And on my far right, Anne Sado, President of George Brown College. Tony Wong, MPP Markham and Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Economic Trade and Development, Government of Ontario. Dennis O. Young, President, Hong Kong University Alumni Association, Ontario. And finally, our speaker and guest of honor, Dr. Lapchi Choi, Vice Chancellor of Hong Kong University. I would like to thank the Hong Kong University Alumni Association in Ontario, represented by Dennis O. Young, for sponsoring today's head table. Thank you, Dennis and the Alumni Association. I'm pleased to welcome three groups of students to today's lunch. They are Cardinal Newman Catholic Secondary School, sponsored by Brass Pan Corporation, Jones Avenue School, sponsored by Concord ADEX Development Corp., and Wexford Collegiate Institute, sponsored by Scotiabank. Students, would you please stand so that we can recognize you? To our guest speaker. Early in the 19th century, Napoleon Bonaparte said, "Let China sleep, for when she awakes, she will shake the world." Well, Napoleon knew what he was talking about. The world is starting to shake. Those of you who read the Globe and Mail regularly might have been struck by the front page of last Saturday's paper. The entire front page, top to bottom, was covered in Chinese characters. In smaller English characters, it read, "If you can't read these words, better start brushing up. A profound global shift has begun, the kind that occurs once every few lifetimes. Don't be left behind." Newspapers very seldom devote their entire front page to any one topic. The fact that the Globe and Mail chose to give that much space to a special edition on China rising says a lot about the perception of how fast China is rising and how far. Just over 25 years ago, China began to move towards a market economy. It has quadrupled its gross domestic product since then. It now has one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and at its current rate of growth will take over from the US as the largest economy in the world by 2040. Within 5 years, half the world's clothing will probably be made in China. Half the world's digital cameras and DVD players already are, not to mention 1/3 of all computers and 2/3 of all photocopiers. In order to sustain all of this growth, China is working extremely hard to develop a better educated workforce. For the past decade, China has been an importer of education, sending students abroad to universities in Europe, Australia, the US, and here in Canada. That pattern may be changing. Educational institutions in China are now beginning to take up the challenge of manpower training, with the older, more established universities in Hong Kong leading that charge. Our guest today is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Hong Kong, the oldest post-secondary institution in Hong Kong. Professor Choi was educated in Hong Kong and in the US. He spent 20 years in Canada, most of it as geneticist-in-chief at the Hospital for Sick Children. He's an internationally renowned geneticist, and 15 years ago was part of the team that discovered the gene that causes cystic fibrosis. Professor Choi joined the University of Hong Kong in 2002, and since that time has been the forefront of a massive change and expansion in Chinese education. This is a change that would almost certainly contribute to China's extraordinary economic progress and may also have repercussions in countries like Canada. He's here today to talk to us about that. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to our podium today the Vice Chancellor of the University of Hong Kong, Dr. Lap-Chi Choi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Noella. A very warm welcome and kind words of introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my distinct pleasure to be here this afternoon. I'm totally thrilled that I've been able to speak in front of you at the Canadian Club this afternoon. I know who spoke here before. As you have just heard, I did my research here in Toronto, but you may read from my CV, I was actually born in Shanghai, educated in Hong Kong, grew up in Hong Kong, and later studied in the United States. But Canada is where I developed my research career, and Toronto is where I always consider my home. I'm particularly delighted to see so many colleagues and friends in some of these over 20 years. In fact, I'm getting rather nervous now because I see so many distinguished guests in the audience, each with a different degree of expectation. And we're only to hear geneticists speak about development in Asia, especially after such a wonderful meal. I will try not to upset your stomach. But anyway, so the purpose of my talk today is to look at how the West, or this part of the world, could further its link with China. In ancient times, the Silk Road was China's link to the outside world. It was primarily a trade route, but it also enabled cultural exchanges, say for music, religion, art, and of course, the art of silk making. So I want to make use of this metaphor to suggest how one can continue to exchange with China culturally through education, hence the title of my talk. There have been a lot of interest all over the world about Asia, especially China, in the past decade. It's hardly surprising because, as Noella already mentioned, in the last quarter of a century, with the reforms and open door policy, China has gone through the fastest period of economic growth in history. China's GDP has quadrupled in this period to a double-digit figure now. Many predicted by making the most of foreign trade, investment, and technology advancements, development, GDP will again quadruple in the next 2 decades. By then, China will overtake the United States to become the largest economy in the world, thereby regaining the position she has held for much of the human history. I'm sure that many of you are already familiar with the facts of China's past and projections of China's future. Some of you might even have been doing business with China or in China for many years. And you might have already found your own Silk Road with this wonderful resource nation of plenty. I also understand that there was a special issue on the China last Saturday in Globe and Mail. Therefore, you are well primed for my discussion, which is about the role of higher education. I don't know, when I read the Globe and Mail, I did not find education as a subject. So therefore, my discussion will focus on the role of Hong Kong, and more specifically, the role of the nation university in the development of a global economy from the perspective of an educator. So maybe a little word about Hong Kong U. It's the oldest university in Hong Kong with 92 years of history. If you count the medical faculty, that would be 117 years. And Hong Kong U is where Sun Yat-sen, the father of modern-day China, graduated. Now we have enrollment of 20,000, about 10,000 undergrads, and then 10,000 postgrads. And if you count the School of Professional and Continuing Education, where we have another 100,000 enrollment, then we can proudly say that we're really the major education provider for the 7 million people in Hong Kong. So we have teachers from 47 countries, students from 45 countries, and we have student exchange established with 20 different countries. So therefore, we're truly an international university in China. I had a chance to visit the Silk Road just past summer. Visited the extremely well-preserved artifacts and treasures from 1,500 years ago. And then for everyone who visited the Silk Road, you must remember Dunhuang. Dunhuang was an important city in the past, not just because it is the northern and southern route of the Silk Road merges. There's also the culture, where the culture from Europe, Middle East, and India entered China. Dunhuang, therefore, for its importance, is sometimes synonymous to the Silk Road. Today, I would like to argue that Hong Kong is important in the new Silk Road. Hong Kong is a strategically positioned, a new gateway on the new Silk Road to China. But Hong Kong is different from Dunhuang. And it's not just a transportation gateway. I had the fortune of speaking to the Vice Chairman of the People's Council just a week ago, Mr.徐立之. And they agreed during the conversation that Hong Kong is actually a value-added gateway. Hong Kong somehow transforms, translates, adapts, and perhaps even buffer the culture between the East and West. And then when I gave this talk last week in Los Angeles, a colleague, actually a friend, Hong Kong is just the name, the smart link to China, as smart cards. So for his argument was that in Hong Kong we have favorable policies, political, legal, institutional framework, sophisticated management systems, business knowledge, respect of intellectual property, overall transparency in business practices, so on and so on. Therefore, I fully agree with him that Hong Kong is the new gateway and the so-called the smart link to China. So obviously, the Hong Kong government has branded Hong Kong as a world city because Hong Kong has a unique position in China and in Asia as a natural gateway by east, west, to new economic opportunities in China and the rest of Asia. After all, a third of the world's population lives in our region, and half the world's population lives within a 5-hour flight from Hong Kong. Some argue that Hong Kong can offer the best business opportunity to the world. But when one talks about Hong Kong's economy, one always mentions the Pearl River Delta region, especially the cities of Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Zhuhai, because these are China's largest manufacturing base and fastest growing region of economic development. I'm not an economist, but the idea of Hong Kong being Asia's world city seems pretty clear to me. Now, when you think about the vehicle on the New Silk Road, many of you will probably have images of the camels springing up in your minds. In fact, I had the first-hand experience of riding on a camel when I traveled on the Silk Road with my wife and friends from Toronto just a few months back in August. It was a wonderful experience. But we found the camel a very slow, not to say uncomfortable, vehicle. It would probably take a long time to get to where we want. It's not as if you can ask the camel to run, because if you have had the unfortunate experience of riding on a camel running, you probably know that they swing from side to side when they run, and you are not likely to stay on the back for so long. So therefore, it is hardly a suitable vehicle for travel in this day and age. So you might have guessed, I would argue that education is a powerful vehicle in bringing the East and the West closer together. Education brings together culture and relationships, builds networks of trade and economy, and perhaps even reduces conflict and contributes to world peace. But education is not necessarily a fast vehicle either. President Jacques Chirac of France was in China and Hong Kong recently, and recalled being told by Deng Xiaoping not to forget that in China, time is longer than elsewhere. Which I take to mean that people's perspectives can only be transformed by education, and that that cannot be done overnight. We have a Chinese proverb which says it takes 10 years to grow a tree, 100 years to educate a person. Therefore, education as a vehicle will be slow, that it will surely provide a prosperous future as we journey on the New Silk Road. It is clear that a nation's prosperity in knowledge economy depends on harnessing knowledge and understanding to help and create, respond to the economic opportunities. In the light of economic construction of the country, higher educations in China are placing more and more emphasis on applied research and development. And China's government has, however, not forgotten about the importance of basic scientific research. For this, I'm speaking with first-hand experience because I have the great fortune to serve on several high-level committees that advise the development of biomedical and life sciences research in the country. China has certainly been putting great emphasis on education, especially on higher education. China has a population of 1.3 billion. The one-child policy has heightened parents' demand for suitable education, including university education, for the children to ensure a better life. But as we are all acutely aware, university education does not come cheap. With over 2,000 higher education institutions in China, resources must therefore be focused. Therefore, the Chinese government decided to create 100 leading universities fit for purpose for the 21st century through the so-called 211 program. The idea was to focus the resources in a small number of world-class, comprehensive, and research-led universities. This strategy would cater for the 1.1 million new entrants to higher education institutions every year. This is a huge number. In addition to developing China's own higher education system within the country, the government has also made use of the education Silk Road by reaching out to the world. During the past 25 years, China has changed its totally closed-door policy to one that supports overseas studies. It encourages students to go back after they complete their studies with a guarantee to stay or go as they like. Under this open-door policy, some 700,000 Chinese students have studied abroad, especially here in North America and Europe. Of these, over 600,000 have since returned home. These figures are staggering, but they're still growing exponentially, since each year some 120,000 students spending something like 4 to 5 billion RMB yuan to continue to study abroad. These are very talents that will usefully contribute to China's growth in the new economy in its future development. By opening to the outside world, Chinese have learned the useful international experience in promoting the reform and development experience to promoting the reform and development of the higher education system, and enhance mutual understanding and friendship with other nations in the global village. A lot of foreign universities or countries obviously saw the opportunity of the education industry in China. Many STEM agents recruit students in China or from China and set up campuses in China. Yesterday, I attended a summit conference north of Toronto in King City, where the education ministers from Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and New Brunswick shared their views with each other or with the attendees on the Canadian education industry. It is worth noting that China was brought up in all their presentations. While most of the attendees were there to hear the representatives from Australia describing the so-called success story of education as a business opportunity under the Kangaroo brand. It was gratifying to know that our Canadian ministers all held the fundamental values of education. In fact, although still a developing nation, China clearly recognizes that, as in the developed world, the shape of its future will be significantly determined by this human capital, and therefore China needs to have a good control of university educations in the country. Therefore, as an example, no foreign universities are allowed to operate independently in China. They must have local universities or perhaps education units as partners. Now let me come back to how Hong Kong can contribute to all this development. The single largest and most valuable asset of Hong Kong is its human capital. The people here are crying out loud to be developed culturally, socially, and economically, and it's how education, especially higher education, can make a vital contribution. After more than 100 years of colonial rule, with over 100 years of history of higher education, Hong Kong is ready to take up the challenge of being an educational hub through which Western societies can find a way into China and vice versa. And how does the university contribute to the society, to the region, and the country? I'm sure you would all agree that there are basically two ways. One, through its research, and second, through its education, through its students. So in the knowledge economy, a modern university can actually contribute further, that is to engage community and society, in addition to teaching and research, through what's now commonly called the third mission, to be useful to society. Once universities were content to sit back after their discoveries on disseminating new knowledge and understanding, but now, today they must also engage in the exploitation and even commercialization of what knowledge, of that knowledge through industrial partnership or networks in innovation and technological development. In many developed countries in the world, universities with the right local economic conditions play an important role in transformation of their regional economy by acting as a hub for the development of new industries. More and more universities are drawn in, contributing to regional development agendas. Therefore, universities must actively develop programs relevant to the local environment, to the local development. In turn, the industries, by buying the services from the universities, are contributing to and investing in higher education. The concept of universities partnering with society is very well developed here in North America, but not so well in China and the rest of Asia, and there's much we can learn from the West. There's another dimension to the partnership between university and society. That is, on the political front, increasingly universities must have a foot in the corridors of power in local, regional, and national governments in order to punch their ways as strategic partners of the development of the region. By improving the community's understanding what universities are, what they do, and what they contribute, especially to the regional economy and the cultural dynamism, the university can add to the cosmopolitan character of the region to which they belong. Let me now move from the general to the specific and say something about how an Asian university should respond to the changing needs of the society. Change is perhaps the operative word here. It is a kind of an environment, a rapidly changing environment in which the only constant is change, and that universities have to operate. So how should universities in Asia respond to the changing needs in its key functions of teaching and learning? In many parts of Asia, especially in China, specialist knowledge is highly valued, and students focus on specialists, often single-disciplinary, knowledge in an early stage and then for the rest of the university education. This is reflected in the large number of single-disciplinary and professional higher education institutions in China. Their employees rather, and in fact elsewhere, are telling us something different. What they value most in their employees are the problem-solving skills, logical thinking, ability to communicate effectively, and so on. Another aspect of employment in this day and age is that most graduates will probably enter and go through several careers rather than a single career in the 30 to 40 years of their professional life. So we have to adjust our supply to meet the demand, so to speak, so that the students learn in the 3 to 4 years at a higher education or in academic university can equip themselves or equip them for the next 30 or 40 years at the University of Life. Graduates will therefore need to be adaptable to new conditions to be able to make choices that will affect their lives and families. So we must reflect this demand in our design of the curriculum. We need an Asian curriculum design that balances generic skills and specialist knowledge. The curriculum must enhance the student's experience to give consumers satisfaction, and such it has to be flexible and to emphasize student choice. There are lessons to be learned from models here in North America, although I would argue that Asia's model should be different and uniquely Asian in order to attract international students from beyond the region to the New Silk Road, potentially as an alternative to the North American liberal arts education. Students should also be expected to complete an international experience, which we can define as study, research, or work abroad, so that they get used to traveling on the New Silk Road. Specialization in a particular discipline for major, if any, should be delayed until senior years. Such a curriculum will equip graduates in meeting the leadership challenges of the region. All these may be deja vu to many of you in this audience, but those of you who are educated from Asia, particularly Hong Kong, this is in fact quite revolutionary stuff. But we all believe in this is the right way to go. Understand I only have a limited time to speak. I should perhaps bring this talk to a close, but I think many of you might expect me to say something about Hong Kong U, especially you are one of our alumni and have heard about our aspiration to become a world-class university recently. Perhaps let me share with you a few of our recent achievements. Most of you should still remember SARS, which came over to Toronto via Hong Kong. Hong Kong, being such a convenient transportation hub, can be really effective in disseminating infectious agents. Colleagues in the microbiology department were the first to identify the positive viral agent, which had happened to be a new strain of coronavirus. They also discovered that the animal sink where the virus originated. These contributions and many others were due to really the fine research tradition at the university, particularly at the Department of Microbiology. You may recall the bird flu incidents in 1997, 2001. It was actually the bird flu experience that saved Hong Kong. How so? Because our colleagues actually gained experience at handling the bird flu. They applied the same to handling SARS. Now the colleagues are frequently asked to help solve problems in nearby countries. For example, they were asked to look at the recent bird flu situations in Thailand, where tigers are dying of bird flu. My second example is actually represented by one of the team members here today, Professor C.F. Lee, who is Pro-Vice Chancellor or Vice President in charge of university relations. Professor Lee is an expert in slope engineering, and his expertise has been shared around the world, particularly in China. Incidentally, he is like me, like myself, a Canadian now returned to work in Hong Kong. Well, Professor Lee is also an expert on cultural history of the New Silk Road, or the Old Silk Road rather. He told me that he would be always ready as your guide. So on the education program side, Hong Kong was designated the regional training center for the World Trade Organization. It was indeed a memorable event to see government representatives from 32 different countries gathering at the university to join this program to study WTO law and trade relationships at the opening ceremony earlier this year. We have other examples, maybe I'll just say one more. Our Journalism and Media Studies Center had also been exemplary in terms of bringing people together from the East and the West. The center has brought editors and reporters from America to Hong Kong, Beijing, and China, and then Shanghai. It also arranged for the mainland journalists to go the other way, that is, starting from Hong Kong and visit North America. In fact, we work hard to make sure that at least 20% of our students would have a chance to engage in exchange programs worldwide. We also want to increase our proportion of non-local students from 10% currently to 20% in 5 years. And although I was sitting up here, but I quickly spotted a group of students from the University of Hong Kong, especially a recent graduate, Fei Fei. I'm sorry not to mention your name because I saw you. And she's the best example. She was Shanghainese, studying at the Fudan University, but through an understanding with the university, and she had an opportunity to come to study at Hong Kong U for her second year. That's our first year at Hong Kong U. And then in the second year in Hong Kong, she decided to exchange to the University of Toronto. And during her exchange period, she landed herself a job. And after her graduation, she's now working in Toronto. Almost 30% of our non-local students came from countries other than China. We hope to increase our proportion even further. As China and the rest of Asia continue to grow to become the largest economy in the world, Hong Kong U.S. as the premier university in the region will be globally recognized and will take its rightful place among the top echelons of the world-class universities. And it's probably the best way how we can contribute to the development of China. Therefore, in conclusion, I've alluded to the phenomenal growth of China and its economy as a context for how education should be used as a vehicle for China's reaching out to the world, or the world reaching out to China. I've also tried to explain how Asian universities should engage and partner with society and industry in their endeavors, as well as to change to meet new challenges of the region. University is an excellent place and an intellectual hub where interested people gather together. And at the university, we celebrate curiosity, excellence, and entrepreneurship. And this is where culture begins, or to meet. And this is a spirit of Renaissance. Hong Kong's unique position as a gateway where East meet West and makes it a really strategic location, a smart link on the New Silk Road. At Hong Kong U, for instance, we are constantly looking for partners to collaborate in research, to collaborate in various development projects, to collaborate in training our young leaders and nurturing talents for the future in the global society. We also welcome input from the society, especially in the international community. I hope you share our vision. Please come join us. We also need your support of our mission. Thank you very much.
Dorothy G. Ma, President of the Hong Kong Canada Business Association, will thank Dr. Choi on our behalf.
Dr. Choi, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Hong Kong Canada Business Association, the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office, the Hong Kong University Alumni Association of Ontario, and the Canadian Club, it is my pleasure to thank you for your remarks today. We're pleased to welcome you home, even if it is for a short visit. Your accomplishments have been great throughout your career. We're all leaving here today with the distinct impression that the work you're doing now to develop education and manpower training modes on the New Silk Road through Hong Kong University and across China is another important challenge that you're embracing, and your enthusiasm is infectious. I have one regret, and that is that I never had an opportunity to meet you while you were living here in Toronto. But we appreciate that you've included Toronto in your visit to Canada this time. And while it's not tradition at the Canadian Club, at the Hong Kong Canada Business Association, we would like to present you with a small gift that is heavy. And